Welcome again to Matt Reads Books. In this ever-changing swirl that we call human life and Matt Reads Books, we are once again changing the format. And in an improvement on last time, instead of me reading these chapters outright to you, and instead of me just sitting here for 30 minutes while I periodically pop in to say something, I'm going to only pop in on the video when I have something to say. So you will not have me just sort of hanging out reading to view. So take that as you will, but it will make for much shorter videos. So here we go. We're going to be starting with section 16 of chapter 2. I'm going to write that down actually, 16, 2.16. And we're just going to do it for 30 minutes. So here we go. Applying the two principles of justice to the basic structure of society, we have to take the position of relevant representative individuals. But because there are so many different categories of individuals, part of the theory of justice must involve determining how we determine which positions are relevant as the most basic for giving the general point of view necessary for the society for analyzing the basic structure. In that sense, the positions that we should select are the ones most relevant to justice, that is, the ones most connected to the basic structure, that is, the ones most connected to the starting conditions in society, present from birth, of profound importance. That's what basic structure is. And thereby, the relevant social positions are the starting places of people, properly generalized and aggregated. Is that each person holds two relevant positions, that of equal citizenship, which is just a static position, and then that with regards to the distribution of income and wealth, where they fall economically. And so selecting representative positions from the point of view of citizenship and the point of view of the various strata of income and wealth have to be the relevant representative positions. Principles is the principle of equal citizenship, and this is the one that refers to the position of equal citizenship refers to the principles of equal liberty and fair equality of opportunity. And so adjudicating among the basic liberties are settled by reference to this social position. And Rawls also says that the distributive effects, even when there are some, if they're immaterial or irrelevant to the real dispute, we don't need to factor those back in. It's fine that in a war there's a distribution effect of going into a war, but the question of the war is a question of justice that has to do with the equal citizenship concerns about liberty and equality of opportunity, not about distribution. The distribution question is settled separately, and if there is just distribution, then there's not a distribution problem with there being, if there is a just war. And he says that it is in this domain that we're able to follow not only those principles of liberty and equality of opportunity, but also look at social policies where we just follow the principle of common interest, where we're able to prioritize institutions that effectively guarantee the conditions necessary for equality, but also to equally further the aims of the citizenry, or of effectively advancing shared ends that similarly benefits people. So basically just advancing whatever common good we want, whether in equipping people or just directly achieving ends. to the second of the principles, or the second of the positions. We already established the equal citizenship, so now we're on to the second position, which is based on income and wealth. And Rawls admits that this is a less satisfactory representation because it's more difficult to judge. At first, he says that we have to go ahead and assume that differences in authority and responsibility are correlated with differences in primary social goods. So, for example, in that if you're wealthy, you might also have lots of authority, and if you have lots of authority, there are good odds that you will also be wealthy. Yes. And then he says, now you might also wonder, well, how many strata do we really have to carve out in the economic assessment, right? Is it rich and poor, or is it upper class, middle class, lower class? Is it upper class, upper middle class, lower middle class, working class, you know, abject poverty class? And he says, well, the difference principle already gives us um, the specification, and or gives us the level of specification necessary, and that is it only singles out one group. It only singles out the least well off. So what we need to determine is who are the least well off. Who the least well off are, Rawls gives that we should look at who is least favored by three main kinds of contingencies based on your family or class origins, your natural endowments, and just the fortune and luck you face in life. That those are sort of the three bases of becoming a least well-off member. And Rawls also says, in practice, all of this is going to have to be more specifically defined, but for now, this will do well enough to give our moral intuitions a shot. And he also makes a remark that we're going to be looking at these sorts of contingencies. We're not going to be looking at the further questions of the mentally infirm or radically physically disabled, people who might not be able to fully participate in society. Rawls's thought is, well, if our principle can't even take care of people who are full participants in society but happen to fall under these three contingency situations to become least well off. It certainly can't account for even worse situations where you're not a full participant in society, and there are additional measures. So he's just trying to prime our moral intuitions in this way. He admits that there will be a certain arbitrariness to determining who the least well-off is. Are we selecting just, for example, an unskilled laborer, sort of the lowest economic participant, and then saying whatever is below his level is the least well-off segment? Are we looking at whoever makes less than half the median income, and so then it's sort of a measure of inequality in the very first order? And he says everything is going to be somewhat ad hoc. But it's at some level, practicality demands that. Point of the basic structure. So now we're moving on. The starting point of the basic structure for determining which inequalities we're even going to take into account has to be the natural differences amongst people. And so Rawls says that for each case of a categorical difference, we have to use the difference principle if we want to justify any distinction in treatment. And thereby, we favor the position of the less well-off party. So, for example, in the case of men and women, if men have more rights, that can only be justified if that is more favorable for women, that men have more rights, than if men and women were treated equally. And Rawls basically says, and this is the same for race or caste, etc. Rawls says this is so infrequently true that it helps us limit the number of natural cases that would even require some kind of investigation, because so often the less well-off party is made better off by being treated equally. It goes on to say that we have to make sure that we're keeping things general. We can't take very specific positions as our standpoint. So, for example, he uses free trade. It might be to our specific disadvantage or the specific disadvantage of a company that there's a free trade regime. But if free trade is justified by the advantage of the least well off members of society and by efficiency, and I think he does say both actually. Um, Let me make sure. Oh yes, from the point of view of equal citizens or of the least advantaged, and I think he means and of the least advantaged, it is justified, even though more specific interests temporarily suffer, or even, I think, permanently suffer, um, because you've agreed in advance from that more general position, those two relevant social positions of equal citizenship and the least well off members. That is the starting line. And then if free trade is established in that by that basis, then adjustments to free trade based on more specific situations still have to flow from an understanding of that foundation. Time with Matt reads books. So that is much slower than we were going, but I think probably a lot more helpful to other people, and actually probably more helpful for me. And since the principle of justice we're using for this YouTube channel is things that benefit me in getting through this book, I think we'll keep it, at least for now. See you next time. To click the like button and subscribe, and to click the bell icon to get notifications of when Matt Reads Books goes for another episode.